Yeah, let's give it another minute. Okay, perfect. Yeah, start recording. While we give it another minute, folks, just a few announcements, and I'll repeat these announcements at the end as well. First and foremost, thank you to everybody who made it out to the first installment in the Philosophy and Film series last Wednesday. We screened the movie Hereditary. We had like 35, 40 people. It was quite a scene. Then if you're curious about how the post-movie discussion went, I believe that's posted in the general feed, so you can go back and check that out. Really great discussion there. Now, speaking of the film series, the next installment in the film series will be 1 week from tomorrow. We finally received notification, confirmation from the from the International Film Series collaborators, and it's going to happen a week from tomorrow. Same fill time, same fill place. So it'll be here. It'll be we'll open up the room at 4 o'clock, begin the screening at 4:30, then maybe begin conversation around 6:15, and I'll go to about 7. So
Yeah,
the film
just as
is
a
a documentary.
confirmation. This is a
Yeah,
confirmation. It will be write down I'm an Arab, or do they
yes,
agree with this remote?
I'm in there. So it's
Okay.
going to be more of a documentary, very different from the film we watched last Wednesday, but I would say every bit as engaging.
Okay. So then that would mean that after this meeting, we do have to talk about the logistic side of not using Canopy but a different source.
Yeah, that's the thing we'll have to discuss.
Mhm.
So I think they have a plan though. That's the idea. Is
Okay.
that like they've been having to sort of work with the copyright laws, obviously, and yeah, they're going to help us out. So that should be cool.
Okay.
Not that we needed any help, but just to make things smoother. And yeah, again, appreciate those who bared with us during the technological difficulties up top. But yeah, I mean that's part of the fun with a PH. Thank you, folks. All right. Big announcements. Again, a repeat of last week's announcement, but we're drawing closer to the date, and that is, of course, the Philosophy Conference. So we'll be hosting the Philosophy Conference the Tuesday prior to Thanksgiving, and that will be the 24th. We have the call for submissions. It's all finalized. We're about to post it. It's going to go out to all of the philosophy faculty later this afternoon, maybe this evening. And yeah, we're excited about it. You have until midnight on Saturday, November 21st, to submit a proposal. It doesn't have to be a completed project, but a modest proposal. So yeah, consider. And again, if you're in my class, if you're taking classes right now, you will have it posted on your eCampus page. And of course, if you have friends who are interested, who might be interested in applying, feel free to let them know. Again, you don't have to be a student specifically at any of the campuses in Dallas College, but ideally you're there. In which case, again, you'll be representing maybe a different school at this conference. It's very professional. It looks great on your resume. It's very difficult to find opportunities to present at real conferences at the community college level. So I recommend taking advantage of it, especially if you're interested in transferring.
Both Susan and not Susan Career here. That's funny. Just one thing before I forget. Could you please write the deadline for submission just in case that somebody arrived later or if somebody couldn't hear properly?
Yeah, I'll include that in the chat. And
Okay.
again, I'll repeat all these at the end of the meeting as well. But all right,
Okay.
without further ado, I guess we could turn it over. I'll just say this: it's not an election day without a philosophy club meeting. I remember where I was in 2016 election day. I was in KBUX Studios recording a philosophy club radio hour meeting. I believe Kathleen Stevens was our guest that day. And here we are 4 years later doing the same thing, more or less. All right, handing it over to the students. Fun topic today. Looking forward to it. I've been
Yeah.
Jeff Mann.
Yeah. Definitely not the voice of philosophy. Okay. So, okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here again. It's glad to see you, or at least I see some of you. Um, Today's topic was was really from Susan Carrillo, even though Orlando wants to like take some ownership in that regard. Unbelievable. What about ethics? Hmm? So, today's topics, as you can see, I put it right in the chat: identity and environment. Before I introduce the topic, please remember that if you want to talk, type exclamation mark on the chat so we can follow the order of every one of you. We don't want to miss any of you. So yes, so identity, is it really our identity predetermined by the environment, or is something that you're free to choose? That's pretty much the summary of what we're trying to discuss today. I will open then the floor to whoever has something to say in that regard. If not, I will be the first one. And this is a cue for Susan Carrillo, just in case, if I wasn't completely clear.
The Susan Carrillo or not Susan Carrillo?
Right here.
Both.
It's okay.
Both.
I take Carrillo. It's all good. I can code switch according to your pronunciation abilities. Let's put it that way. Okay. Well, I mean, I hate to start off this way, but I'm gonna start off this way. I think that, like, the question itself. I think the question was, are we free to choose our identity, or to construct it, or to create it, or is it a product of the environment? But maybe I misremember that. Is that how you advertised it in the email? Do you remember how you advertised that question in the email?
Sure, I can post it. I can check it for you.
I looked at it because I remember when I saw the question. I don't know. I felt like the question might be worded a little bit differently. Like, I mean, I can look for it as well. So, I guess I'm not fully ready with the point.
Don't you worry. I have it right here.
Okay.
So
okay.
I have I'm quite fast. I'm handy. So, is your identity formed upon your interactions with other beings, or is the environment who dictates what your identity could become?
Yeah. Okay. So beings are in your environment. So to me, if you're asking, you can just ask environment. You don't have to ask about beings. But if you mean something more specific or more narrow with environment, then I guess you have to clarify how you're using the word environment. So I think you could have just said, are we? I don't know. I just felt like beings shouldn't be in there because beings are in your environment. So I guess I would need clarification on how the word environment was being used with respect as opposed to persons, or I'm not sure. So that's what I'm starting off with.
Okay. I mean, the way I see it is the environment is larger than just the interaction that we have, for example, in this case with people. An environment could be, for example, those who live in cold places may tend to have a different type of perception of their environment because they need to protect themselves from the cold. They eat different type of food. So the environment is broader than just being. It's not just the interaction that you're speaking. Some people, which has been some cases, that they grew up without any human interaction. So their interaction is just with animals. So they grew up with different type of interaction and their environment changes. So that is pretty much what I'm trying to suggest with the email. That it's not just the interaction verbally that you have, but how much of an impact can that have on your person and on your identity? And after you realize all these changes are going through you, if you're once you recognize that those changes has been through the environment or whatever interaction you had, are you free from that moment to just kind of really define what you believe should be you, or you're still going to be continue that process of being defined by your environment in that moment? So your self-awareness really does have some saying in what your identity could become. That is pretty much what I'm trying to suggest.
Okay. I'm not going to say anything else because I always have plenty to say, so I'm going to be quiet for a moment.
But that's great. You can always just go ahead. And I
No. I have to share the space. Trust me, you don't know that.
Okay, so we do have someone who is interested in just talking right now. Is Yusha. Go ahead.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Professor Carrillo. It's, I mean, for today's topic, I know I wasn't there last time, but it's really interesting to wonder about one's identity. And in this regard, I guess I would propose a question: which identity are we exploring, or are we talking about? Because one is an identity that you give yourself, like when you're by yourself or when you're around people that you're super comfortable with. And the second is an identity that you show to others, which you are not fully trusting yet, or it's like more of a professional set environment. So to say the least, I think we should kind of set ground with exactly what we're talking about, or even in general, like how do we set it? How do we define ourselves? Do we define ourselves to ourselves, or how we put ourselves out to define ourselves to others, to make them see, okay, this is who I am, this is who I want you to see, and this is who I want you to interact with, as opposed to, okay, this is who I am, these are my goals, and this is how I'm gonna do this. So
Okay,
those are
so
just some questions I had some in mind as I was reading the email.
okay, so before I set the floor to Nancy, okay, so what you're trying to suggest is that there is a chance that you can have more than one identity, and you can maybe be more representative to one more than other in certain situations. Is that what you're trying to ask?
Yeah, because
Okay.
see, I'm not, when, for example, a lot of people here, I know you guys because we've been in so many meetings together. You see one side of me, but when it comes to a stranger, or when it comes to meeting a new person that I don't know completely, they're gonna see a different, more reserved side of me. I'm not gonna make as many jokes with them. I'm not gonna tease them. I'm not gonna mess around with them. So that's the kind of stuff that I want to help people keep in mind when exploring the idea of identity, because you're not always that one thing that you yourself want to be. You have to role shift to fit into certain situations. For example, you cannot make random jokes at a job interview. You need to present them a different self of you. You need to present yourself differently to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the stuff that I kind of want to help explore today in terms of identity.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I guess in this case, it's like, I mean, I see what you're trying to say. It's like, I mean, the question primarily is more like how you identify yourself, but in this case, you're also expounding like how other people can identify you. Okay. Now, Nancy, it's your turn.
Yeah, Yusha, thank you. I really like how you framed that question. I'm just going to build on that and kind of tie it back to last week's topic, determinism. So based upon how you're describing it, Yusha, it sounds like the presentation of yourself that you reveal to others is determined by the environment. So you're saying, if my environment is this, then I have to be like that. That doesn't really sound like free expression. It sounds like you have to adapt to the circumstances, and the circumstances are determining the self, quote unquote, you want to present. It's very compartmentalized. And I just want to juxtapose that with, I think, a more classical understanding of personal identity. And it's the idea that if you develop, I'll speak kind of loosely here, if you develop your character, if you develop who you are in a way that's you're dedicated to becoming a certain kind of person, maybe a courageous person or whatever the case may be, you're able to be that person in any context. So it's never the context that defines you. You're the same no matter the context, because you know who you are, quote unquote. So two very different ways of approaching the dynamics between oneself and one's environment. And I'm just curious to hear, not just what y'all think, but what y'all have experienced. I mean, how have you been human? How have you done this? Just wondering. All right, thanks.
Yes. Well, even though I do want to add something to Nancy, since Orlando has been too quiet today, I will let him speak first and then I just reply.
You can
Go
leave
ahead.
an exclamation mark in the chat, so you're next.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm kind of tired. I only had like 4 hours of sleep. But I do want to say something to what Manzi said. I think it's funny how, I do see how, it's kind of interesting because you kind of brought up what I was wanting to talk about. And it's this idea of, I feel like you're getting at, of a true identity. Does this idea exist? I feel like that's kind of a question here. And I don't think it does because there's this awesome article by B.F. Skinner. He's a psychologist, and he was talking about something called selection by consequences, where basically he's asking the question, well, are humans really so special that they can adapt to these ever-changing obstacles, and essentially that's why we're so great? Or is it really that our environment has essentially picked out the traits for someone to flourish, and essentially we were just lucky, you know? And he seems to basically say that it's the latter of the two. And so with that being the case, I kind of think about it myself. I'm like, okay, well, I'm thinking about my values. You know, how about you guys think about your values? What you do in your everyday life? Why you picked the job that you picked? You know, all the students here, all your goals in school, they're only because of the specific environment that you live in. You know, if the world tomorrow, the society was to crumble and basically your life, your family's life, everybody that you know's life is on the line, your morality essentially is going to go out the window. All these ideas of, oh, this is who I am, it kind of goes out the window. So all this idea of true identity, is this really as permanent as we think, or is it only circumstantial?
Well, I don't think it's permanent, but it doesn't necessarily goes all morality out of the window. I mean, some people are gonna be more immoral than others, but I guess that's when it comes to the identity, and it's something that Jeff Mansi was mentioning. Like, there are some people who manage to be more constant with their identity. They are a little bit more like, they have a sense of self that is more like, I guess they believe that it's better for them, long lasting, regarding of the situations. It kind of like works in more scenarios for them than others. So, I mean, in my personal experience, like if you put me like 2 years before and like today, I'm like somebody who I don't even give much of a crap of most things that probably before I would. I'm more able to, oh, there you go. We're going to be taking school in a couple of minutes. I'm more able just to stay kind of like balanced, and things like this to kind of like even start a conversation will be something. Yeah, no, hey, I even bring sticky notes and have like pen and things. So I'm just waiting. I'm ready for it. So I remember that before I felt so kind of like I felt, I guess I understand you, Chef, because of it. I felt a bit sad that sometimes I felt like I had to like hide a part of me just so I can feel better in the position, until I just kind of like decide that, you know what, I don't care. Like if I don't fit, I don't fit. And it was until I started to act that way that I started to be happier like all around. But I will give my floor to.
Can I say something to you, Fernando, real quick, just a response? I mean, I completely kind of agree. I think the common consensus in our society is that there are certain values that we hold so permanently that those can be kind of the baselines for our true identity. But I think a good example is the movie we watched last week, where basically you had a kid who was set on certain moral standards, but because he was put through so much trauma, because he was literally demoralized, it kind of just flipped on the inside, you know, it kind of flipped outwards. And so I kind of have that question, you know, what if I'm a perfectly sane person and I say, you know, all life is meaningful? Well, what if I'm pushed to the edge from now on every single day forward? I'm just pushed to the edge every single day, and people just show me the worst sides of themselves, and I just see the worst side of humanity. Isn't it possible that I could be driven to be a killer? And isn't that possible for literally everyone here? We're
It
basically
is
all,
a possibility.
and so
It
basically,
is definitely a
so
possibility.
then I think you have to ask yourself, well, which one specifically is the most important value that we will never let go? Is that even a thing?
I don't think that's a thing. But I mean, there is a possibility one stays strong enough. If I mean, they have people who have done it, uh, that overcome like that constant throw to them until they achieve some type of change. Um, but I will discuss that in a little bit. I will just use my thing and I will go after Susan.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Bye-bye. No, don't worry.
Okay, did you say after me? Am I next?
Yes, you're
Okay.
next. Yes.
So I want to know what is meant by true identity. What were you thinking when you said true identity? Because that makes me think of the debate or a debate out there about like, is your identity? I don't think you mean that identity is innate, not in the sense like your values and your sense of who you are and what you believe in and what your goals are is innate. But when you say true identity, I kind of first go to that, but I'm thinking maybe I don't think you think that. So I'm wondering what you mean by true identity.
It's a combination of that. I mean, I think when I think of true identity, I think of the Aristotelian idea of essence, that you have this idea of true essence. That's kind of where I'm coming at here.
But again, I would say if it is a true identity, then why does it need to be located? Why does it need to be found? Why does it need to be pondered upon if it's a true identity?
Well,
And
that's
that's why I propose the idea of a person having more than one identities depending on which situation they're in.
Yeah,
Well, could
I
Yeah,
mean,
but you're
the-
identifying as a
could-
person.
Couldn't you
Yeah.
claim that if I'm proposing to be someone that I'm not and that I know that I'm not, that in a sense that could be false identity, or a certain mirage? Not to claim that there is true identity, because once again I just said that there isn't. But like I think that could be the distinction between what you just stated there.
You don't think there's true identity? You can't identify as a table. You can only identify as a human.
I like that. All right.
See, but that's about
That's
it. But what
different.
defines what defines us as a person? Because that cannot be. See, as human, yes, that is your identification that you are a human being. But what makes me Yusha? What makes you Manzi? What makes Ferdinando? What makes Orlando? That's the stuff, because it is very fluid. It changes. Like growing up, I wanted to be an astronaut, but now here I am working at a law firm, obtaining a degree in data sciences. So does that mean my identity back when I was younger was that false, or my current identity is false?
Okay, so
Because those are the identifying features of me. That, hi, my name is Isha Qureshi. I'm 23 years old. I go to Dallas College and I'm studying data sciences, as opposed to me in middle school. Hey, I'm Yusha. I go to grade 4. I want to be an astronaut. So which one of them was true if the case of identity is solid?
Can you hear me?
yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Okay. So Yusha, I think all of your identities can be true. And so if, because you can actually peel back the very discussion of identity to think about, okay, how are we using the word identity itself? So when I used to teach identity, I used to focus on, in virtue of what, do I persist as the same person, if at all? Like, am I the same person I was 5 years ago? And you're kind of touching on that, Yusha, in your comment. And I think that your different choices or bundles of values were a true bundle for you at given segments in your time. So I think that just because your values change, that's interesting. So am I the same self do I have to have the same values and beliefs in order to be the same person throughout the same time? Is that what you're saying identity is? Or like Locke says, is it enough for me to have memories that connect back in time? So, it's interesting to think about how that all comes up. I'm not saying one thing or the other. I'm just bringing up the questions and the concepts that you stimulated in sharing your thoughts.
Yes, I do want to ask one question, since I see you address it. I don't know if Chenico was trying to participate, but I did saw that you asked her to put the exclamation mark. Was she trying to participate? I just don't want to miss her input in case that she has any.
No, I think she signed in. I think she joined the meeting a little bit later, and so I wasn't sure if she knew the rules. She's my student, so I just wanted
yes.
to make sure
She actually joined. She was one of the first.
Oh, she was? Okay, I didn't notice her until she said hello. They
Yeah.
get extra credit if they at least say hello.
Yes, I noticed, because she was very emphatic in it. She's like, "Is this Carrillo's class?" And like, well, it is not a class, but she can take the class tonight. So
no, it's informal fun, but I need to do a better job of that. So
no, don't worry. Okay, I do want to read something before I say anything. Rabbito is saying, yes, you can define yourself as human, but what kind of human is the question? Yeah, I guess it's part of the personality, and I do like what you are proposing, Susan. I think it's better to call you Susan than Carrillo, even though in my country I use a lot of Carrillo, so that's why I just pronounce it that way. Okay, I do like it, because I do believe that I don't think there is like a constant identity. I think that that's something that you keep developing, but I do like how you mentioned you connect our memories to kind of like how that plays a role in our self of identity. Because if we are not able to remember what happened, that's I'm going to point in this. If you're unable to remember your life in this moment, would you still be reacting to the same situations as before? Does that make sense? Like if you lose all your memory now, would you be able to like express and like have the same kind of like way of thinking if you don't have your memories? Which is something already that we discussed in one of our meetings. So I do like what you propose. I will now give the floor to Orlando.
Well, just real quick, I think that student was responding to my comment when I said to Orlando,
Oh.
there are identities.
Yes.
You identify as a table, you have to identify as a human. And so the comment's like, well, okay, but what is? I like that comment because it's like, okay, so we say, fine, I identify as a person. What is that? What does that mean? And I think that's important because, especially, you consider things like 20th century theories on personal identity formation. It's like, well, maybe the quote unquote essence of a human being, of a person, is to be dynamic, is to decide individually for oneself what one's values are. Do I reject the inherited tradition of values, whatever that may be? I mean, that's what makes us maybe different from a table or something like that. It's precisely because we understand that we're incomplete or undefined. Again, the nothingness that Sartre talks about. So I like that question because it does force the issue here. Well, okay, great, I identify as a person. Tell me more. So thanks for that comment.
Manzi, that was I gotta say that was awesome because like I feel like every time you talk, because I was going into like what I'm gonna say and it's kind of weird. I don't really like that. So let me give my idea of identity real quick. So like when it comes to identity, I kind of agree with what Fernando and Susan are saying. It's like, to me, it's like a combination of your memories and like your value set that you have in a current state. It's like it's a combination of basically this path that you have essentially followed along and are currently. And that's essentially your identity. So it's like identity to me seems to be temporary in that sense. It's not permanent. But like going past that too, something you said that was interesting, Nancy, was it like what differentiates us from a table is that we have the ability to change what we are and our purpose. But I can kind of claim to say maybe that's not the case, because if our environment really determines our personhood, our identity to some extent, then couldn't you say that it was all predetermined? Couldn't you say that because I was placed in a specific environment, I was almost destined to be this thing, just like a table was destined to be used as a countertop? And so with that being the case, let's think about it. I mean, if I was to be raised in another country, would I still be the same person? And that's what I'm trying to say. Is like into the different environments that you're born into, you're kind of produced as a different person. I think that's something that's interesting that Aristotle talked about, like his political theory, that different political systems produce different kinds of people. His ideas of friendship and so on and so forth. So with that being the case, is that really what differentiates us from a table? Can we really change to that extent? Is it our environment that chooses for us? Come on, what is it really?
I mean, but I do want to say something very quick. Like I do agree with you. Like I do think that the environment has a huge implication of what you can do. However, I do think that you can use those things and kind of like force you into a different environment that can kind of make you something a little bit different. You still, I think, in some extent, you're going to be subjected to the environment. But I mean, let's say somebody who has a lot of resources is probably going to be able to pick the environment more than someone who isn't. But it doesn't mean that someone who doesn't have that much resources can like force himself into be in a position where he can start like being in an environment that could make him someone different.
But if you take that to like a broader discussion of tying it back to last week of determinism, what if it was predetermined that you would go into those different environments? What if all this idea of you going here and going there and having this free will?
No, but if you think about it, like, I mean, I understand where you're trying to go, but if that was the case, then why is it that sometimes per families, let's say that two siblings for the same per family, one of them can become like very rich, while the other one is just like in the same house, like without being able to move on? There has to be something else besides just like being predetermined.
It could be, you could say genetics. You could say it's genetics.
But let's say if they're twins, how much of a differentiation? Like just one atom, like
I mean,
I see what you're trying to say, but it's trying to like consider more options than just you are determined to be the way you are. Even though in some sense it is, because if it could have been different, but it still isn't, then you know. But that's something I don't want to scare you guys. You said you're next.
Thanks, guys. It's a very interesting conversation indeed, but I don't know. It's just me that I think. See, the identification goes in a very vast subject, in my opinion, because when you discuss the identification of a table versus a human being, these are just physical identifiers. That's how our brain knows what stuff is. Like this can is identified as a can, but the physical identification of me is a human. But when it comes to the cerebral or the abstract identification of who I am, I think that would be more interesting to go deeper into. Like I don't know, like Locke did in one of his books, where he explores that the human being is in the premises of personal identity, and we must figure out what the person is for, but not as physically, but as an abstract, as the difference we were discussing when we discussed mind and brain. So what defines you? Not just physical traits, not just genetics, not just concrete stuff, but the stuff that's not malleable, that kind of stuff that identifies. What is that identity that we're looking for?
I'm assuming that the identity has to be, for example, how you react to different situations, how likely you are to get maybe upset because you think like I'm just that guy. I'm just a guy that I get upset out of nowhere. Like, for example, Mansi is just the one who gets bullied during this meeting. He's just that guy. He has that identity.
He's just that guy. That's his identity. That's just who he is.
Yeah, and that's the environment he has been blessed upon, you know. He cannot escape it unless he removes himself from the equation. So
It's who you made. Made me be this.
Which
Environment.
actually that brings up another topic. Like we said, this topic has many strands. So we can talk about chosen identity, if in fact there is a choice in identity, but we can also talk about attributed identity. Can people place upon us an identity? I used to participate with a sociology instructor where we put labels on students' heads, on their foreheads, and then we put them in group with a problem-solving thing. And they'd have to treat each other trying to problem solve according to their label. And they would start to respond to and act like the label that they were given, but they didn't know what their label said. And so they kind of became the way that people treated them. But they had no idea. They knew there was a label that had a role to play, but they didn't know what the label was. And so those people attributing the label to them influenced how they interacted with that person, and then that person internalized that behavior and actually became more that way. And so I think it's interesting to talk about how much of our identity is chosen in terms of values and beliefs, and how much of it might be attributed to us. And that's only one strand, because we haven't even really defined. I mean, going back to the distinction between humans, if there is one, in persons. I mean, Locke said that the same physiobiological entity, i.e. the human animal, is not to be equated with the same person. For him, person was it was self-awareness, a self that could be aware of itself as itself in different places at different times, you know. And he actually thought that was not ultimately dependable on a physiological being. It doesn't seem like it. He thinks that it could, you know, exist in different substances. So I don't know, I get all over the place because as my colleague knows, identity is one of my favorite topics, but more on that later.
Susan, I feel like you kind of answered that dilemma though, because you said this attribution is kind of a part of what your identity is. So if you're really separate from your physiological being as a person, I don't think that's maybe the case, because part of who you are is because of your reaction to other people and how they perceive you or how you want to be perceived. And so this idea of personhood that exists, well, internally, if you want to say that, it exists also in this external force, essentially, with your interactions with others. So without your physiological identity, without how you look and how you are and how you identify culturally, this person doesn't really exist.
Yes, but I don't wanted to I think I might have just forgotten what I wanted to say. Great. But I know it was related to what Susan was mentioning. Bringing it back, bring it back, bring it back. Oh my God, I lost it. It was just because I
Very quick,
focused on texting.
while-
That's
while
why
you're
I don't
thinking-
text. That's why I don't text. But it's okay. I'm not completely sure if Mansi had his turn. So
No,
I
he
will
did.
use Mansi's to. Okay, so I will have to remember on the spot. Thank you, Mansi. Yeah. So.
In chat, in the chat, I think Jay Tian, if I'm saying that right, I do apologize if I got that wrong.
Rory?
They said that, in my opinion, can I say that environment is an external factor? So if anyone, since there's no one in the queue, not that I know of, if anyone would like to take up on that, please
Yeah.
go for it.
I do believe
I'm in
that
the
the
queue.
environment is the external factors.
I think Mansi wants to take up on it.
Listen,
I
I
mean-
do appreciate that comment. I just wanted to add something to the discussion that was happening earlier, just because again, yeah, we're approaching like the 45-minute mark. You know, I don't want to get bogged down in just trying to define terms. I think it might be a bit more fruitful if we, instead of starting with the abstract, just ask yourself, well, how do I identify myself? Where did I learn how to do that? Like reflect on how you function day to day. I mean, today, election day, is a big day for an identity in a very particular way, you might say. So I think that's why this topic is appropriate. But getting back to, you know, what allows us to form a more permanent identity, you know, the memories and such, I think, you know, I really think it has to do with narrative. I think human beings are able to be aware of the fact that they exist in time and that time allows change. But if you're aware that you're changing, then there's some permanence to you because you're aware that things are different. So, I mean, I'm very, very fond of the philosopher Paul Ricoeur, who has written extensively on this narrative personal identity. But of course, a story doesn't take place just in the vacuum of a single character. A story requires environments. It requires a setting for a plot to develop. So if the plot of your life story is your life, I mean, I think it's safe to say that at the very least, the environment is going to play a rather formative role, not just in who you become initially, but who you choose to remain or who you aspire to become in the future. And then I think that's, you know, at the end of your life, your whole life becomes a memory for others. And then how they remember you, in turn, continues to play a role in the abstract version of your identity, even though your life has passed, presumably. So yeah, that's something to consider. Also, everybody's talking about perceiving other people's interpretations of you as though you're an expert at perceiving other people's interpretations.
I just
mean,
remember what I wanted to say. Thank you.
I mean, it's very easy to just get the wrong impression from somebody. Either you read somebody wrong or you read their read of you wrong. So I'm not so sure that's a really solid way to determine your identity, but just something throwing out there. All right, I'll shut up.
Yes,
Sorry.
but I do wanted to say this before I forget again. But isn't it they're saying that a big part of you is a product of the 5 people you interact the most? I think there is a saying in that's why you should like be more careful who you like get in touch with because you eventually will pick up some of their traits into your own like personality.
That's
Yes.
debatable.
Yeah. Okay, so I have Grace Elizabeth. She is, yes, it's a she. She's saying this. The looking glass theory seems similar to what Susan Carrillo is touching. I'm not completely sure what the looking glass theory is.
Just-
So if you, if
Just a
someone
quick
wants to-
note. There are 3 people in queue. First is Shaniqua, then Zaytian, and then Rory.
Yes, I mean I'm going through the text like until I get to that point. But if somebody wants a little bit more on that, if somebody knows a little bit of that, that would be great. Let's see. Okay, so then we have a chat. I have Cheniqua. She says, I think that people identities can be determined by what people are saying because sometimes people will start being how people say they are. Interesting thought. Okay, so with that being said, actually, I think, was that a exclamation mark or just an I, Chaniqua? I'm not completely sure. I will give like a couple of seconds just to kind of like, if you want to speak, you're free to
It
speak.
was supposed to be an exclamation mark, but I just, I don't know. I'm driving my daughter to gymnastics and listening in on it too.
Okay. I'm not completely sure if she was asking for like a minute, but that's okay. Oh, yeah. All right. So in the meantime, I don't want to mispronounce your name, but I'm pretty sure I will. Yeah.
It's Shaniqua.
Oh, okay. So Chaniqua is ready. Okay, go ahead, Chaniqua, and then we
Yeah,
can.
so you can just call me Tiny though. I mean, it's
Oh, no.
easy for
Chaniqua is fine. I was wondering, is the person next to you? I know that
Oh,
those type of names you have to actually like do something that my accent kind of like do not allow me to. So, but Chaniqua is fine. Yeah.
okay. So I also think you can have like sub identities, like your overall identity is this kind of way, but when you're say at church or with others, your identity is a little bit different, but it's still the same. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, what you're
Yes,
trying
it
to
does.
say is that you have a main identity, and based on that main identity, you may have some ramifications that are kind of like related to some extent, but it's still a little bit different. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's
I
fine.
agree.
I agree too.
I mean, even though even your sub identities are, a little different, it's still, I guess, based on the same values as your bigger
Yeah,
identity.
yeah, because it's still a product that is coming from you, so there has to be some
Yes.
type of like consistency. You cannot just be completely different unless you have like a complete, this like, I don't know, some type of association in your mind or something. But I understand what you're trying to say.
I will.
Yeah,
I
there
will
has
say
to be a
something.
deep.
I'll say
I was going to
something
say
real
there has
quick
to
about
be a
that
deep.
is what then if this is the case with our identities, right? Because at the beginning of the meeting, that is what I was trying to explain, that we have separate identities. But if that is the case, then how do we define the one, dissociative disorders and multiple identity disorders? Where do they come in then?
I mean, they may be just one big part of your identity. Maybe your identity is to have multiple personalities. It's just one thought. It's just one thought. Don't look at me like that, Nancy. I'm just proposing ideas so people can discuss them.
It's a fantastic.
All right, so Tian or Jie, I'm butchering your name. I'm so sorry. I just trying to make you be involved. But you're next.
Okay, so I'm so sorry. My English is very bad. So sometimes I just type letters for us. So I just think like environment is a external factor. So it is decide our will and our identity. So identity is a factor decided by the external factors. I just think that so because the previous chapters we said we never have free will. So that is like identity, I think. For example, I think in my opinion, I think like new baby, they have no will. It is blank in their brain. So the environment and some people around us, how to raise them, how to feed them. So they create their own will and identity. Depend on outer factors, I think. So outer factor like education, social or social conditions is very important for us, for children, for for everyone. I think this is my idea. So I love philosophy. Some topic very interesting and very important for us.
It is.
Whatever our age, whatever our races. So, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're human or you're mancy. Philosophy
Yeah.
can, become everyone. By the way, you have a very good English. Don't doubt yourself, and I don't want you to feel like you cannot speak because of your English. You spoke very well.
Oh,
So
thank you.
you had us on our toes. Congratulations in that regard.
Thanks.
Excuse me
Sure.
interrupting all the time, but Jennifer, you keep coming back to the table. You wanna expand on that? You wanna bring it to the table?
She wants to be identified like a table, or I think she just wants to do a joke and nobody has asked the right question for her to do the joke. Well, hope be by all means enlighten us with your joke. In the meantime, Rody, you're next.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello.
So what I would like to bring to the table is the relationship on how identity influences an environment. So in a lot of cases, there's a lot of licensed marriage and family therapists will study how family and group dynamics influence an environment. And so you can have one person and I think it's communication theory that comes into also, but having the ability to have either coalescing identities that match with one another or identities that clash could actually make or break the social and even physical environments. So like let's say that you're in a family dynamic to where a parent has substance abuse issues, as an example. And I'm bringing this up because this is going to correlate to dissociative identity disorder. So let's say you have a parent that that has issues with substance abuse. And during those episodes to where the person is using that substance abuse, they get violent. Well, and let's say there's a child in the picture. That is a hostile environment, which produces a hostile identity for that child. So, in some cases, with the mind, when it gets so overwhelmed that it will split, and that's how you get dissociative identity, because it's not so much you have multiple personalities just because it's because you are using it as a defense mechanism of your environment. So and that person, and it's sort of like a back door to escape the reality or the environment that you're in. So when you split into a different identity, you have no recollection of what happens when you're in that different identity. That different identity will experience reality a different reality in a different environment. So that's sort of like the theory behind dissociative identity disorder, and it's a very, very complicated condition. Now, going back into our scenario with a parent with substance abuse, identity can influence the environment, because if you go into like a bar, for instance, you more likely than not can associate having that previous identity of abuse, to where when you go into a bar, you might be more heightened and scared to be in that environment because of the previously associated identity that you attribute to. So even though that environment influences identity, identity influences the environment as well.
I agree. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Give
a
me
great
just
point. We really talked about the other side of it. How our identity and how we identify impacts the very conditions that gave rise to our identity in the first place. And oftentimes, yeah, if the conditions are less than ideal, it could really impact us traumatically in a way where, yeah, we identify in a way that's unusual. The actual process of our forming our identities is different, almost fundamentally. I mean, I think that's a great example when it comes to just how drastic of an impact an environment that you had no part in creating can be on you.
That could
Or
even
less.
I'm sorry.
Ah,
That could even be broadened to like the idea of a political system. You know, these systems that are essentially set up by other people, other individuals, and they have these long-lasting impacts on the identity of people, generations to come. You know, if you compare maybe systems like socialism versus capitalism and how they affect people and how they produce people, you know, that's something that's very, very true to today.
for sure, especially when you have to realize you're given an identity before you know how to identify.
Yeah.
Definitely. You have to come to terms with
your birth certificate.
Huh?
That is your birth certificate, that identity that is given to you before you learn to identify.
I mean, that's one.
You're already put in this kind of shell or a clothing that this is what it is.
That's funny. It's like you're given a number. You're gonna be number 20, whatever. And that's funny. They give us ID numbers in school.
They give us ID
the
numbers.
Social Security number.
No, even
numbers
before
in some
Social
moment.
Security number, the identification number on your birth certificate, the certificate number. That is who you are. You are nothing.
You're just a
You
number.
are the number.
You're just a number, man. Like, hey.
Come on. What? Sorry, Susan wants to speak.
I'll stop, guys. I'm sorry.
I think you're muted.
You're muted.
She's not
You're
muted.
She is muted.
No, look at her mic. Look at her mic.
But,
icon.
okay, but I cannot hear her.
Me either.
I cannot hear her.
But she's not muted though. That's the thing.
No, she's leaving. No,
Susan.
No, Susan, don't leave me.
Have the voice.
Okay, so she muted herself. Now she.
And stay out. Oh, welcome back.
Okay, so what she's saying is that I have been right the whole meeting, and you were wrong. That's right.
What she's saying is she defers all opinions to mine, and yeah, appreciate that, Susan. Thanks for the support.
Thank you. So nice. I mean, you can always just try to come back and like leave and come back. I just hope that it's fast enough because I have to leave in 3 minutes. But yeah.
Oh, should we decide on a topic?
Well, saying it,
sure.
It's not gonna tell.
I mean, okay, I guess. But I mean, yeah, it's fine. We can start like trying to create a topic, I guess. It was so much fun.
Well, I mean, keep in mind that next Wednesday, we're going to have another film collaboration. So let's try to think of a topic that relates to Write Down I Am an Arab, which is kind of this topic, honestly.
Can I suggest
keep in mind, it is that the movie next week is, again, on identification. So you might want to be prepared for that by today's meeting, because it is about identification and how that person who the movie is about identifies himself to the external world.
And he's a poet.
Yes.
Okay, I will read very quick until like Susan comes back. Rodi is saying one thing that is interesting in psychology and philosophy is that identification of your environment geography. What is the identification of your environment? And Susan, Jennifer is saying, I will definitely say I have more of a sense of identity than I did years ago as a product of working through codependency, where I just seem to people please and do whatever the other person wanted. In some cases, I realized I didn't even know what I like at all.
That's powerful.
which is a very good point you're making out there. So that also kind of like suggests like, okay, so do you mean that your lack of taking decisions for yourself did not allow you to identify what your identity is, but wouldn't that lack of action would also be somehow your identity at that point? You just weren't that aware of that.
Or did she get closer to her true identity? Whoa.
Oh, what? But I mean, we cannot continue trying to
I
say
know.
true
I know.
identity. if it
I
is
don't
always
even believe
changing.
in true identity around here. It's just good old.
I like
Can
it.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Man. Yay.
Okay. I do have a question. When did you become aware that you are a self? Because I know when I think I know when I became aware of myself as a self. Like, did you have that moment? Like, do you remember? Because I remember it happening in philosophy in my introductory class, and we were studying Descartes. We got to meditation 2, and he says that the self is better known than the body. We get to Locke, and he defines what he thinks a person is. And I realized I grew up in a collectivist family, very Catholic, very Mexican American. I can't remember having a notion of the self. And and I don't know if I'm having a false memory or just making up a story that makes sense. But I feel like I grew up to be raised like I didn't have an individual self with individual rights and individual opinions. And I didn't become aware of myself as a unique entity, a unique being, a unique person that has awareness of itself throughout space and time. So do you guys have a memory like that? Like when you first became aware of yourself as a self, or when you were first introduced to the concept of self?
But you remember
Well,
making choices as a child.
Yeah, but this
Yeah,
is
but
the deal.
I didn't constitute that
I
with
think there's a
choice. I
difference.
didn't constitute that with. I didn't connect that as being self.
Yeah,
So I made
I,
choices, but I didn't link making choices to being a self.
I do have to say this. At least this is my experience with this topic. Um, I do have some sense of self, but it was not because of me. It was because my parents always make me wonder who was I. Like since I was like 4 or 5 years old, they were like, "Who are you?" Or they started to say like, "Oh, you seem to be this kind of person who is kind of like this." I start wondering like, really? And since I have a twin and I see the big difference that it was between us, I was wondering since very young, like really why I was the way I was and why my brother was different. And so I do think it really depends on how early, I guess, you're exposed to this idea. Sometimes people just realize that they are really knowing the self definition of self, but they don't really, they are not aware that they are doing it until somebody points it out and it's like, oh, I was doing it. Um, but I'm aware that I was doing it before. I wasn't aware that I was doing it in the moment that I was doing it. But I will have to leave. And it's been a pleasure. Love you all, guys. And I will try to come back soon if it is a possibility.
Will the recording continue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for coming, Fernando.
Oh, he's gone, I think.
I thought he'd never leave. All right.
Can I say something to that question? I think this idea of self-awareness is kind of a skill, or because if you think about self-awareness, it's not as simple as I'm frozen on my screen. I don't know if you guys can you still hear me?
Your mic is on, but your video is off.
Okay, that's cool with me, I guess. I don't really want to see my face anyways. So what I was saying is like this idea of self-awareness, there's a degree to it, you know. There's a difference between understanding I am Orlando, I have these wants and these needs, and understanding my own habits, understanding why I do the things I do. So it's like it's not something that you just come upon one day and you're just like, whoa, I'm self-aware. No, it's something that you gradually kind of obtain over time, it seems like. Because my first idea of sense of self was kind of came out of arrogance to say, oh, I'm different from other people. And then it kind of came from this idea of understanding, oh no, I'm really not that different. Okay, what am I? Well, then what is different? So on and so forth. So it's like it kind of increases in time. The more you question yourself, the more you notice yourself, observe yourself, so on and so forth.
Great point. Yeah, I think you're right. Excuse me. The whole idea is to be as mindful as possible, not just of your decisions and actions and responsibilities, but the motivation. Yeah.
There we go, isn't it? Okay. I think
Hey,
Rory wants to say something.
See, for me, I would say that since I was very young, at first it seemed to me that my parents were not being parents, to say the least, that they always let me do things at my own terms. Like I would see and hear from other students in my class that, oh, my parents don't allow this, they do that, they do this. But my parents were like, they left a lot of stuff for me and my siblings to do ourselves. Like whenever we would get in a fight, it was up to us to resolve it. My parents wouldn't even step in. Even until today, they don't step into when my siblings and I get into a fight. And a lot of stuff like that, they let us figure out how we want to do things, my siblings and I. And I think that did give us a very strong strong sense of who we are and who we want to be, as how we want to be identified as. So when I see that, like in the chat, we have two people saying that they're recently becoming more aware of who they are, and which is good, but it isn't necessarily bad that you are not fully aware of who you are, because as humans, our interests keep changing, our goals keep changing. And a while back, someone brought up the idea, I think it was Rory, that short-term and long-term identity. So having said that, I don't think we should feel apologetic or sad in the sense that, oh, I don't know who I am, I don't know what I'm doing, because it is, I guess it is a dilemma of the Western world, because if you go towards East, Middle East, even Africa, South America, over there, people are always bettering themselves. And this is one habit that unfortunately I've only seen in Americans, that they always bring themselves down to kind of make their point, which I'm not too fond of, but that's getting off topic. So I don't think it should be something that is looked down upon, that, oh, you haven't found yourself, oh, that's a pity, blah, 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 whatever. Yeah, I'm still working on it. I mean, I have all the time I need until I die. So to those who were in the chat that sadly I'm still figuring myself out, don't feel bad, because as Professor Carrillo said, she's finding herself again, and there's always new things you learn about yourself. So keep the lookout, stay curious, stay eager, ask as many questions as you can. And having said that, I'll hand it over to Rory, because I know he's been waiting in the queue for a while.
Well, I got to interject here, just to be perfectly clear, because I'm afraid I don't want to lose this topic. But it's like, your grammar is kind of betraying you, Yusha. When you say things like our identity keeps changing, you speak in the passive voice rather than the active voice. Where's the subject of that sentence? Who is changing the identity? When you say our identity keeps changing, and really you phrase it in such a way where it seems like we have no control over it. It's just changing, like the tide is changing. You know, so the question becomes, why does your identity change? Or what's more,
I said that,
yes. And so
I say that in relation to my earlier point that our identity is fluid.
Yes, but that begs the question: what's causing the fluid motion? What is the catalyst for the change in identity? And I just want to make sure this is clear, because even in the way that we phrase certain formulations of personal identity, it's very telling. Your identity doesn't just change; you change it. And you might say, well, no, your environment causes you to change things, but you accept or reject the environment, or you change your own environment. You can change environments and not change internally. You can change internally, not change your environment. I just want to make sure that we really keep an active subject, so to speak, grammatically, to the identity, because otherwise it makes us seem like we're just objects and just things happen and we change and that's it. I'm not so sure that's what it's like for humans. Maybe for everything else, but not for you.
Or a table.
Or a table. I'm putting it all out on the table. Okay, Rory, I'm sorry.
So I think that.
Thanks for coming.
So Professor Manzi, that sort of brings me into what I wanted to talk about is the whole, in terms of like identification of, do we as specific individuals and within our several subgroups are in terms of identity, are we more prone to be of a fixed mindset or growth mindset? And I bring that up because identity, our sense of self, there are different levels of identity. So like, for example, I am a college student. Well, that is, I would hope that's a short-term identity. However, my name is Rory. That's a long-term identity. My name will not change unless if I get a government change. But being a college student, that has a time limit. And so having different identity labels influences how our environment is perceived. As if you say to somebody who is maybe in the baby boomer period or before then, you can be like, well, I'm a college student. They may have one perception, one identity, and one environment process that fits their identity, their environment. However, when we explain something, that can change their perception of identity, their perception of our environment. So, however, when somebody hears my name, they immediately would probably see my face. That's more of a long-term identity. So identities are meant to be fluid. However, we as humans tend to hold on to particular identities more than others, depending on the relationship of the self or the degree of relationship to the self.
It's a fantastic point. I really like that point. I feel like we can talk another hour just on that. But what do y'all think? I suppose we should wrap up. We're a little bit over. It's nice to end on a strong point like that too. All right, so typically, again, what we usually do is vote on the next topic, but because we have another film screening on Wednesday, we like to make it cohesive. So we like the topic on Tuesday to reflect the themes of the film on Wednesday. Now, again, the themes of the film on Wednesday are very closely related to what we talked about today. But of course, the film isn't tomorrow, it's a week from tomorrow. So perhaps next Tuesday's topic could be either a further development of this, or maybe we could pick a different angle on the documentary and use that. I mean, for those of you who've already seen the film, what do y'all think?
Have any of us seen the film?
No.
I don't think so.
I thought you should saw.
I'll suggest something. I don't know if it's really related that much, but it was kind of just it's in relation to this topic. I think it's like political systems. Obviously they're a part of our environment, but like how they essentially breed people or how they kind of produce people in a certain sense, and how they're different from each other. I think Yusha spoke a little bit on that, how he was saying some countries and Eastern Hemisphere, they're different from the Western Hemisphere, like our traditions here, traditions there, so on and so forth. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So something like different forms of identity, or specifically political.
Okay. Politics and our identity, you could say that, or we could just put political systems.
I like the idea of thinking about, you can think both about the politics of identity and the identity of and how politics itself, informs your identity. I live in a neighborhood that's completely split. Half the neighborhood's for Biden and half the neighborhood's for Trump. These children don't choose to, be born into the parents that they are. So I think that would be really a relevant and timely topic to kind of focus in on that if we can. And it's like, this was the warm-up discussion where we get the bigger questions out of the way, and then we can focus on the relationship between politics or governments or geopolitical states, parties, things of that nature, and identity.
Yeah.
Well, if we go down that route, I can talk about my experience as an election judge and a voter registrar for Dallas County.
Cool.
I actually
yeah.
wrote a psychology paper on this psychology of elections and the social relationships of elections.
Nice.
So I can bring that into the discussion and have everybody read it, because I do talk about my personal identity and how that relates to why I became an election judge.
That sounds good.
One thing I would like to propose is maybe to talk about the semantics of identity or the language of identity.
Well, that could
How-
be connected to politics as well. So, you know, the political semantics or the semantics of politics and identity and whatnot. I would think.
Yes, agree with you.
If we do talk about politics and identity, if it'll be okay, I can send my essay to Orlando or Professor Mancy and have everyone read it, because I do talk a lot about identity and motivation.
I think he's disappeared.
Who are we waiting for? Are we waiting on someone?
I thought that my colleague usually closes this meetings, but I don't know. Oh, there he is.
No, usually Fernando does.
We're lost. We're
But,
lost without you.
No, I'll take care of
We
it
don't know
since Fernando isn't
I still,
here.
I still have to wait for 45 seconds.
Yeah, it was devastating.
The whole thing goes. Okay. Yeah. Just to wrap things up. Once again, the film series will be a week from tomorrow. Resuming, it'll be the second installment. It'll begin at 4 o'clock right here on our Teams page, and it will go until roughly 7 o'clock. Last Wednesday, we hung out for almost 5 hours. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was great. And I think we got about a small slice of the conversations. At some point, we were like, oh, we should probably let's record some of this. But it's a lot of fun. You get all the time in the world to talk. And if you like films, this is the thing for you. So having said that, I also want to remind everybody and check the chat for this of the Dallas College Philosophy Undergraduate Student Conference, Fall 2020. Look for the call for submissions to go out. I believe my colleague Louisa is sending it to all the philosophy faculty across the district tonight, and then they'll be sharing that hopefully with their students. Again, the conference will be held the Tuesday prior to Thanksgiving. That's the 24th of November. It'll begin at 10 a.m. It'll end at 4 p.m. We're going to have potentially multiple presentations simultaneously. Teams allows us to do that. The Philosophy Club meeting will be part of the conference, because again, it'll be on Tuesday. I think we're going to end it with the Philosophy Club meeting. I think that's appropriate.
Yes.
So yeah, having said that, if you have any additional questions about the conference or anything that the Philosophy Club is up to, you can find my email address there in the chat, gmanzi@dcccd.edu. And I look forward to y'all's participation, both in the meetings as well as all the other additional events.
Thank you for that, Professor Manzi. Just a quick note, we do have 3 topics for next week in the chat. So please go ahead and drop a quick vote. And for those who don't know what role confusion is, that would be roughly the age before you mature, where you don't exactly know where you fit in. So I suggest you might want to read up on that. It's pretty fascinating. Just let us know before you leave on what you would like us to talk about next week. Thank you so much for joining. We love you guys so much, and you guys keep us going.
Okay, bye.
Professor Manzi.
Yeah.
If we do the politics and identity topic, if that's the topic for next week, do you want me to share you my essay and then you can share it with everybody else?
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, send it to me via email. I'd love to read it.
Okay, awesome. All right, bye everybody.
Bye, Rory. Thank you for joining.
Not a problem.
Okay, so yeah, it looks like it's going to be politics and identity.
Yeah.
Sweet.
I mean, you didn't suggest a topic, so I had to take the blow for you.
No, I appreciate it. That's totally fine.
I had to pick out one that people would not choose. Qian, did you have something to say? I'm sorry, you put an exclamation mark, but I didn't see it.
She might have meant to vote one.
Okay.
Bye, Jennifer.
Bye, Jennifer. Thank you for joining. See you next week.
Are you sure? How do we stop the recording?
I'll take care of it.
All right, cool.